Hello and welcome to the Small Business Briefing. I'm Brian Calley, the CEO of the Small Business Association of Michigan.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. And of course, I'm Sarah Miller, Vice President of Marketing and Strategic Communications. And of course, I want to say thank you to our sponsor, Consumers Credit Union. I'd love for you to check out their website at consumerscu.org. So Brian, we have a special guest on the show today, Tom Snow, who is one of SBAM's top insurance agents. I'll turn it over to you to do that introduction and have a conversation with him.
Yeah, awesome. One of the things we try to do on the briefing is to give people a chance to just understand what's happening out there in business practices and best practices, and we've got an awesome relationship with a network of agents across the state. Now, there's a bunch of reasons why people join SBAM. Sometimes it's because of the advocacy. We have great networking events, peer-to-peer learning. You get compliance knowledge and education. Keeping up on what's going on in the governmental system, things that you need to know, but also about half of SBAM, about half of our operation is dedicated to what we call Harmony, which is making sure that small businesses have access to to benefit packages for employees that look and feel like what a big business would be offering, so that you can compete and win in an extremely competitive and increasingly competitive environment for finding people. And so we invited to come on today Tom Snow. Tom happens to be the top agent that works with SBAM, and right out of Marquette, Michigan, which is a booming area, really cool place in our state. And Tom's been in and around there really his whole life. And so first, Tom, thanks for coming on the show. And I thought maybe you could just give a little bit about, part of the Acrisure family, vast up there in Marquette. Maybe just a little bit of background first with you and in your background in the business world.
Thank you both for having me today. And yeah, as you said, I mean, pretty much in the Upper Peninsula my entire life. I did take a stint away, moved away, and realized, man, I want to be back in Michigan. But obviously I spent a majority of my career in the financial industry, spent some time in Grand Rapids at Huntington Bank, and then found my way back here working for the organization. And now we're obviously, as you indicated, an Acrisure partner today, specifically. Primarily, I've been in healthcare and employee benefits for the last 15 years in the agency. It's been the niche specialty where I spent most of my time, and a lot of work I do is primarily in the high-tech engineering, manufacturing space, as well as in healthcare specifically, and in private practice and even small hospital per se as a whole.
Well, we'd love for you to leverage that experience in this conversation as we've got an audience of small business owners that either right now are watching or the next 24 hours will tune in. So maybe just some insight, some of the things that you're seeing that are like the biggest wins for employers when they're evaluating the types of benefit suites that they're offering.
Well, I think the biggest thing today is, especially on the small business side, is the major evolution we've seen in technology and how technology is helping employers become more transparent with what they're putting in front of their employees and what they're offering them. And the pandemic, as awful as it was, I think drove this and kind of put it on steroids for the industry as a whole, and allowed and made employers, I think, really adopt the idea of using technology to not just look at it as, hey, we're trying to create efficiencies, but also a way where you can communicate, educate, provide value to your people and help them understand. And honestly, instead of bringing that stack of paper home to your spouse that's helping you make these decisions, you're able to take that information with you and make those choices in real time versus having to go through reams and reams of paper. Every year you got to go through the same rigmarole to sign up. And so I think the technology aspect has given the employers that are embracing it an advantage because they're able to show and celebrate and really showcase what their offerings are that they provide their people. And there's a ton of value in them, regardless of your plan structure, what you have, how many you're offering. Um, I think it employers allow them to really showcase what they're doing, and I think it's also given the employer the advantage to get out of the mindset of saying, hey, I have a one size fits all. We have one medical plan and one dental plan. Now, I think with technology and the efficiency it creates, you're seeing more and more employers offering employee choice and really getting out of the way of, offering healthcare in a siloed basis today, and really trying to cater to their employees, and obviously dealing with different demographics of employees today.
Yeah, especially considering the demographics, as you mentioned, everybody's in a different situation. This idea of being flexible, offering options, it feels and looks sophisticated, and probably would give applicants for employment a lot of confidence, like you're going to a very stable place. It's going to be here in the future, because otherwise they wouldn't have this level of benefit offerings. Now, obviously, we're big fans of the agent, of the insurance agent method of offering benefits. Everything that we do is through local agents around the state. But maybe if you could, in your own words, describe like what the value is and why it makes sense for small business owners to go through agents, and how it can help, and the sorts of things that you do to help control costs in an environment when it just seems like, we've got this cost curve with employee benefits. It's just really hard to keep up with.
Right. I think the first piece of that question comes down to the value of an agent and what they do. At the end of the day, it comes down to advocacy, and it's having a support system and an extension of that employer's team to have their back. A lot of small businesses today, employers are doing more with less. And so they need that support. They need that backbone. They need somebody that's going to respond, be there, help them through the good times and help them through the not so good times, that employers face. So, we built our team around and continue to evolve and evaluate that on the basis of how do we serve the client better? Like, what are they looking for? What do they need? Even in the last couple of years, we've created and added new positions that we didn't have previously because of just customer need and wants that they're asking for and looking for today.
So when you deal with a lot of small business owners, you wouldn't be our top agent in the state if you didn't. So maybe give us a flavor for what are the trends right now? What are people doing to be competitive in an increasingly competitive environment for finding talent in a shrinking? We talk a lot about the demographics, labor force participation, the way that it's just getting tighter and tighter, and really promises to get even tighter in the future in terms of finding people. What do you see in terms of trends in benefit offerings that employers are turning to? We talked about cutting to control costs, but then also to be competitive with finding the best talent.
Yeah, it's a great question, and it goes beyond just the medical insurance side of it, right? Employees coming into the workforce today, what we're finding, they're finding value in many different things, and even seeing employers now, we're getting more and more requests to say, what else can we be doing? And the biggest question I always ask them, and I believe in, is really, if we're going to add something, bring something to the table, it has to be meaningful, right? It has to solve a problem or create a pathway to better access, right? I think we could all agree that the mental health aspect of what is going on in our communities, across the state, across the country, nationally right now, I think employers would behoove them to dig in and really lean into what resources are out there for behavioral and mental health awareness, support for the employee staff. Because I think employees in general want to feel like their employers got their backs and are taking care of them at the end of the day. Health insurance to a degree is almost like an expectation When you're going in for a job, it's not one of those things where they're like, well, yeah, I'm going to go there and not have healthcare. I mean, that's what people are looking for. But I think it's a lot of the additional things that are attached on or that complement the healthcare plan to really support the population. And it's not just the healthcare piece, it's other things, other factors that people are dealing with. I mean, you're starting to see this advent of lifestyle spending accounts being created by employers where, they're using, a third party to help them distribute funds to help pay for daycare expenses, or, even with groceries, all kind of a different way or an approach to help support the households or families, that they're supporting in their communities and organizations as a whole.
Wow, that it is interesting as as you get into that sort of, we hear it a lot now that employers kind of embracing this idea of being more involved in problem solving in the lives of their employees than what they ever have before. And while there's maybe a little bit of resistance to that, like, well, we didn't used to have to do these things or offer these things or get involved in those things. But those that have just embraced the idea, like, this is what's required these days to be competitive, to differentiate yourself, are the ones that are staffing up and finding people. So really kind of along the same vein, and you're kind of getting into this already, but maybe just give some flavor of your experience in terms of the role that these items play in both stability and loyalty among the workforce.
Yeah, it's a great question. I think loyalty and stability, is driven by the culture of the organization. We talk a lot about that with the employers we're working with, like culturally, what's happening, what's shifting with their people, and do you have a workforce community that is really collaborative and supporting of each other? And I think those organizations are the ones that are seeing and taking advantage of the workforce that are out there and finding those positions, because it is their culture, it's ingrained in their culture to take care of their people. From the day they walk in the door to the day they retire, it's ingrained in them to focus on culture and really the whole person, and spend time looking at that, not just from what am I spending on benefits and what value does that bring to the household. It's a part of that equation, but it's much broader than that today, with the workforce and what they're looking for. And I think employees today, or people that are looking for, they're looking for something where they're gonna be doing something meaningful, and their work means something, and it's providing value and having them see, what they're doing and what they're providing for that organization they're working for.
Well, Tom, I really appreciate the partnership that we have with you and with VAST, and what you do to support our members and the mission of the Small Business Association of Michigan. I know that when we refer people back and forth, trusted partners are so important, and VAST has been a long-term trusted partner for the Small Business Association of Michigan. Thank you so much for coming on the briefing and sharing your expertise.
Thank you as well.
All right, yes, thanks, Tom. So we have a few other topics to cover today. The first is unemployment. The Unemployment Insurance Agency has named a new leader of a new Legal and Compliance Bureau. So Brian, what's this new leadership about, and why should our members care?
Kim Breitmeyer is the name of the person who is now leading this new bureau at the Unemployment Insurance Agency. This is something we were really pleased to see happen. And so legal and compliance is really the area where they root out fraud. They deal with issues. Sometimes we saw it, like literally organized crime that siphoned money out of the trust fund throughout the pandemic with the extra benefits that were offered, and also when there's this huge volume going through and some of the fraud protections were lessened. But really, that trust fund, which is over $2 billion now, it got down to almost zero before, and through advocacy that SBM did along with other organizations around, other business organizations around the state, we banded together and asked that the state make contributions to replace at least dollars that were known to have been siphoned off because of fraud that shouldn't be billed back to our employers. Well, it's back over $2 billion. So even though these big federal programs aren't running through it like in the past, it's still a huge target. It is always has to be on guard because of fraud. It's always something they have to pay close attention to. So this new bureau within that department and the leader is really charged with detecting and investigating and working with law enforcement to root out the bad actors in the system. So it is something that has been needed. It well, it's been something maybe could have made a case from before. Since the pandemic, I think we really understand better than ever why it's so important not to just assume that that there aren't issues that add up to millions and tens of millions of dollars, because we have seen, in fact, during it even got into the billions when you include the federal programs and some of the organized crime throughout the pandemic that targeted this fund. So creation of the bureau and hiring a strong director is an important first step, but they've got a lot of work to do to ensure that what has just happened never happens again.
And speaking of work to do, the UIA did create a modernization work group, and SBAM is part of that. And then here, we actually created a task force on the subject. So what do you have to report there?
It's a long-term project to modernize the unemployment system. And it's one of these areas that, if you were to just pull together small businesses who have employees and therefore have interactions with the unemployment system, if you put them in a room and they just talk about how things are going, undoubtedly the conversation will somehow get to struggles in dealing with the unemployment insurance agency. It's got an old system. It's clunky, it's cumbersome, it's difficult to deal with. It's been trying to make a transition from paper to electronic, but some things still have to be done in paper. Some things are electronic. It really, some of our members talk about it being like a full-time job just to keep track and interact. And also there are some compliance issues on the claims side too. People that wouldn't fall into that maybe fraud category, but folks that are just kind of checking the box to maintain eligibility. And really the system lets them skate through when they're not really looking for work while they still have eligible weeks under the system. Those are the sorts of things that we're at the table talking about as the system is remade for the future. Now, the state has contracted with a third party, Deloitte, who is going to essentially transition the state from where it's at today to a new and modern computer system to interact with. And while it won't be the first time that they've done that, it will have to be customized or tailored to Michigan specific items. But this is the opportune time for modernization efforts to occur. So there's a lot of stakeholders at this table. SBAM is one of those representing the business community. And we're hopeful that throughout the rest of this year, we really are at the goal setting stage of the process. And I think in the fall is when the real work will start in terms of how the agency operates, how it's able to detect problems, how it enforces accountability, how it reviews what the benefit levels and weeks available are, and also the types of features and how you would interact with a small business interact with the department, hopefully electronically. But we've got on our list of concerns with our task force a desire really to have people available when there is an issue, a challenge, a problem, to be able to deal with it without essentially having things months and months and months crossed in the mail. So a lot of work to do, but I couldn't really say enough about Julia Dale and the new director. I say new, she's been around for almost 2 years now in this department, the longest serving director in about 10 years. And it's a burnout type job, and they have a hard time keeping people in that position for long. But Julia is doing a great job in outreach and making sure that she's hearing from stakeholders, and seems to have really given SBAM a special seat at that table to to ensure that small business owners are deeply heard, understood, and supported through this transition.
All right, let's talk about the corrections department next and how they have begun framing programs in the context of workforce development. Why is this important?
Yeah, this was, I was delighted actually to see the director, Heidi Washington, from the Department of Corrections on Mackinac Island during the Mackinac Policy Conference, which is a gathering of business leaders from around the state put on by the Detroit Chamber, to really start framing the programming in Michigan prisons around workforce development. So Vocational Village, which was started in the previous administration and had a lot of great success, has really now been taken to the next level, expanded to more prisons, including the women's prison. More employers are at the table, more offerings and skilled trades so that people are coming out of prison that are equipped to fill needs in the economy and earn not earn a living, but a really good living and a whole different pathway. Michigan at its peak, Michigan's prison population was over 50,000 people. It's now at about 32,000 people. Recidivism rate is in the low 20s in terms of percentile. It used to be closer to 50. So not only is the prison population way down, but also the recidivism rate has been trending down and staying lower. And it just shows when you deal with the root causes of problems. And Vocational Village and the vocational and trade education in prisons is only one piece of that. Addiction treatment and problem solving courts have had a lot to say about that too. But just this mindset of getting more people back in the workforce is so critically important. There's over 1 million people with a felony on the record in Michigan. I'm not talking about people in prison. I'm talking about people that are not in jail, are not in prison, or just in the workforce that have a felony on their record. That's like so many people that have gone through the system. And the idea of, well, you've got people and they've made a mistake and they're paying their debt to society, getting them back on track is really part of our agenda in terms of workforce increases. And it's what caught my attention is the way that corrections is now framing the issue around workforce. I think it's really smart.
All right. So Brian, we have a new deadline that employers who have employees with I-9 forms need to pay attention to.
So during the pandemic, if you have employees, immigrant employees that you have to complete an I-9 form on, during the pandemic, you're able to do verification of forms electronically. That was part of the emergency conditions during the pandemic. That expires on July 31st. So now it requires that you do in-person or visual inspection of those documents. And so you'll need to do that. This is a requirement. I think they give you until August. We've got an article that we'll share in the comments that will tell you more about it. But if you have employees that you're required to fill out I-9s and you haven't switched back yet to the visual inspections, the in-person inspections of those documents, you're going to need to do that. You can designate multiple people in your organization to do it. Make sure it's somebody that you trust and somebody who knows how to follow compliance rules that does it. But this is a practice that, for convenience sake and the idea of social distancing in the pandemic, that was eased. And those pandemic era rules they're all coming to an end. And this is one of them that certain employers that bring in employees from around the world are going to need to know about.
All right. So next week is our annual meeting. We've talked about it many times on this show. There is still time to register at sbam.org/annual meeting. It's next Thursday, June 15th in Lansing. And, this meeting really would not be possible without our platinum sponsors. And so I just want to say thank you to Blue Cross Blue Shield of Michigan, DTE, Consumers Energy, Chase Creative, Oakham's, and the MEDC, the Michigan Economic Development Corporation. So again, if you haven't registered yet, there's still time to do so, and hope to see you there. Have a great rest of your week. Thanks, Tom Snow, for joining us today, and we'll be back here Monday at 3 p.m.
Thanks, everybody. See you on Monday.